All right. How you guys doing? Welcome to our Full Sail on Air. We have a presentation today with Zach Allen. And Zach is alumni and is an '07 grad. He's got credits like you wouldn't believe. He's a producer, mixer, engineer, and even now into songwriting. So we got a lot for you guys today. We're super excited. So if you guys will help me welcome Zach Allen to the stage, please. How's it going, man?
Good to see you. Good to see you. How's it going?
Please, here, step into my office.
All right. Let's do it. How's it going, guys?
Nice. So really, the topic today, we basically have this slated as secrets to breaking into the entertainment industry and staying there, which you've done a pretty good job of doing, I would say. So far, right?
They ain't kicked me out of town yet.
Not yet.
So I'm hanging in, yeah.
So as we were just mentioning a moment ago, you're an RA grad, and you came down here, graduated in '07, if I'm not mistaken. And so really I'd like to pick up the story basically just on your way out of Full Sail and how you've been able to, break into the industry. What were some of the things that you were doing leading out of here?
Well, I think, the most important thing that I did was I didn't wait till whatever day I graduated was to say, okay, now what? Back when I was in school, which makes me sound, dates me a little bit, I was about month 7 of 12, I was already trying to figure out where am I going to end up? What city is it? And, it's important for everybody to ask themselves the question of where do you think you fit in? Like, what kind of people do you get along with? What kind of, what kind of music are you into? So I ended up picking Nashville based on really two or three reasons. I'm from South Carolina originally, so I've got a good rapport with my family, and I wanted to stay kind of within driving distance of them, to where you can get home for holidays and hang out as much as you can. New York and LA were the other two places you hear a lot about. And as I'm sure y'all have heard, it's kind of hard to go in with a good paying job. You're going to have to pay your dues for a while. So Nashville is somewhere I could go and get an apartment and at least not go too much further into debt than I already was. So that made sense. And two, obviously being originally kind of from that general area, I felt like maybe I can relate to these people. I'd never been to New York, never been to LA. I'd never been to Nashville either, but I just, something in me, my intuition, my instincts were telling me that's where you need to go. And, fortunately, I guess it was right so far. So.
And you had mentioned something when we were talking at lunch earlier, and one of those things was when you came here, you were actually already, kind of mid-20s almost. You weren't straight out of high school when you graduated. And so one thing that I wanted to get into is that idea that, you have to be this certain age in order for you to, like, if you don't hit, this stride by this age, it's too late and you can't get there. And I think you had mentioned that you were actually happier that you kind of waited a little bit to get into that. So I was wondering if you could speak on that a little bit with the maturity.
It really, for me, and I think every person, every situation is different, but for me, it worked out great. I was 24 when I got here. I went to a college and just kind of kicked around, trying a little of this and a little of that. I was playing gigs, playing guitar and singing covers for 4 hours and doing that kind of thing. But like probably everybody in this room, everything I tried seemed to just fall short of my passion for music. So I'm just a firm believer that I think it takes a lot to expect a kid that's 18 years old to say, okay, I know what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I'm going to college and I'm doing that. So I think being able to get out of high school, live a little bit, kind of explore some things and just grow as a person helped me take this experience more serious when the time came, which I mean, really, as y'all know, it's a super, it's an intense school. You're going to get like anything in life, you're going to get out of it what you put in. So being a little older gave me the opportunity to kind of take it a little more serious. And too, when I got up there, there's a lot of session musicians up there. It's not so much band oriented. It's becoming more so. But at the time, most of them were, 10, 15 years older than me. So at least at that point, I was 25, maybe relating to a 40 or 45-year-old as opposed to 18. It's going to be harder to kind of connect the dots. So I'd lived a little bit to we had similar humors and stuff, and that's the name of the game. People are going to hire you if they like you. So and want to hang.
So speaking on that, since we're talking about, kind of breaking into the industry, so how did you do that? You came here, you studied hard, you worked, rigorous schedule like everyone else is used to here. But once graduation, what did you do? What was your plan, if you will, to get in? So how did you exactly get to where you are now?
Well, that's we could spend the whole time talking on that. But basically, for me, I've told this several times. When I showed up here, I didn't even know what a recording engineer was. I literally went to major in something that I didn't even know was a career, oddly enough, which is kind of funny. So it's a complete accident that I became that. So dating back, I felt like it was, how can I get to where I'm going? So my vision was to get an internship and ultimately a staff position at a studio. And so it got up there, struggled for a while. You're not going to get an opportunity right away. And I ended up getting a staff position at a place called the Tracking Room, and basically made myself irreplaceable. Just didn't let any job go unnoticed. If there was a break in the action, I saw a coffee cup or two, I'd run them to the dishwasher, or emptied the trash, did everything that nobody else wanted to do, to the point where your internship's up. It's like, well, we have to have this guy, because who's going to do this, and that's kind of the psychology of taking an internship and treating it like a job, basically.
And did you work before you got your internship? Like, did you work anything else just to survive a little bit?
Yeah, various
while you got
things.
That opportunity.
I did some production labor, which is essentially like after a show, you'll get they'll hire people to come in and help load cases and trucks and that kind of thing. I worked at Guitar Center, which was, it's funny, but to build your network and learn things, it was kind of vital, because being as green as I was when I got here, I really needed the experience of a studio to touch a console and touch Pro Tools and actually to really absorb what I learned here, because there's so much information coming at you so fast. You retain it, but you don't, if that makes sense. So that was my vision, is like, I have to land a staff position at a studio, and it took me about 7, 8, 9 months to do so, but fortunately I did, and just built my network from there, and the rest is history. So
and speaking on building your network, that my understanding was you had worked at another studio previous to Tracking Room. So did you do some production work outside of Tracking Room and working to get to that position?
There was a couple small little studios. There's a million little hole in the wall places up there, but I met a guy, handed out a card, and then, hey, go talk to this guy, and you show up, and I was there for about a month or so, but it was one of those situations where you might show up and they wouldn't be there, kind of a thing, and it goes back to what I was saying to some kids earlier, where you almost have to qualify them. Don't always just let them qualify you and see if you're a good fit for their company. Qualify the company and see if they're a good fit for you, because obviously I don't like to show up to work and nobody be there, and so anyway, I did some stuff there, but it just really wasn't anything panning out. It was just kind of spinning my wheels. So eventually,
but you made the most of it.
I made the most of it, did your thing, and just kept head to the grindstone and going, you know.
And we also, I'll pull up some photos. We'll wait for them to show up on the screen in a second. But we actually have some photos of the tracking room that you ended up working in. So here's a beautiful shot right here, so you guys can get like a picture of it. And so explain your progression there. So you did some work, and then you got an opportunity, you got an internship, and you were just stating that you found a way to make yourself irreplaceable by doing some of the skills that maybe other jobs that people didn't want to do without being told, kind of ahead of time, and that landed you that far. So then how did you grow from there once you got past that internship? So you got it, and now they said, hey, we're gonna pick you. And so if you could pick up from that point here in the tracking room.
Well, you start out, you go through, and you do all the stuff nobody wants to do, and then to take that information, and obviously in a room like that, there's some pretty big time engineers coming in, and so every day you try to grab something from them, because there's all these nuggets of knowledge that you can take with you and learn. So slowly but surely, it's kind of an out of sight, out of mind thing. People start seeing you around, and then, it might take them 4 or 5 times, but that's Zach. I remember him, And then it kind of started out, and I think the first session I did might have been like tuning a vocal. And that's why I tell a lot of people, it's like, man, don't worry about running an 64 channel SSL. Like, do something that you're going to get hired for, because nobody's going to hire you the first gig to do, run the motherboard, if you know what I mean. So I think I started out doing tuning vocals, and then I might have done a few background vocal sessions, and then it kind of graduated into doing some lead vocal sessions and comping, and just, okay, the more things you do, and then as you start to have success, people start to rely on you more,
And actually, that ended up happening here in the tracking room, because as you had mentioned, what ended up happening was you worked your way up, you got your opportunity, and you started showing them, hey, I have these skill sets. I'm going to make myself irreplaceable. I'm going to, put in 100% effort and do it without being asked to. And this led to you. You ended up having about a 6-year stint, was it, that you were there?
Yeah, I was
and eventually
there.
you were pretty much like running, the place, weren't you?
Eventually, talk about making yourself irreplaceable. Eventually got to a point where I was doing all the booking. My phone was ringing all day, every day. I had the calendar on my phone, which, so you're booking the studio, you're doing all the invoicing and billing for it. You're also the head engineer, you're engineering sessions, maybe producing projects on the side. It was just constant everything. And when it was over and when it was time to leave, it was time to leave. I definitely was like ready. I'd built my network to a certain point and was ready to get out there on my own and just focus on making music and not the aspects of running the business, which is great. But the passion is creating music, whether it's tracking sessions, mixing, writing songs, whatever,
So in this photo, you were in a session, and so who are some of the members we have?
So the girl with the Sith-looking hoodie over is an artist from Germany. She hired me to produce a couple records on her. On the first one, we did with just a bunch of session guys there in Nashville, and they loved it. It turned out great. But upon that, I was like, man, your voice kind of reminds me of Shannon Hoon, the singer of Blind Melon. So she took that, and the next year they came back and they're like, we're going to do another record. And her dad had actually reached out to a couple of, to the guy on the far left who was in Blind Melon. He wrote the song No Rain, which I don't know if you guys remember that, and I'm probably showing my age right now. But anyway, the idea was to have basically the band of Blind Melon be her band, because the singer tragically passed away in the 90s of a heroin overdose. Well, one of the guitar players was in law school, and the drummer couldn't do it. So the guys on the ends are both from Blind Melon, and the drummer ended up being Dave Cruzen, who was the original drummer of Pearl Jam. He played on 10. So Brad, he was bass player, he was like, yeah, I was like, because you want the drummer and the bass player to mesh, that's it. That's the backbone of the song. And I was like, well, who's the guy that you vibe with? He's like, I'm pretty good friends with Dave Cruzen. And I was like, yeah, that'll work, So it was, we got to camp out in the studio for 5 days with those guys. While I've probably worked with more famous people, at least at that up to that point, that was one of those like wow moments, because these are guys that are, in my top 10 bands, where it's like, what am I doing here? You know what I mean? So it was really cool.
Here's just another session you had going on here, just to show some variety.
That at some point was, I forget what college they were, but it was a big band jazz thing. We had drums in the booth kind of behind. You can't see them, but I think that was like a 15, 16 piece horn thing. Just real cool thing. And it was a bunch of college kids like you that they came down to do their senior project, and it was a lot of fun. So
what are some of the skill sets between going from like heroes like maybe Blind Melon, like you mentioned, to something like this where we have a whole ensemble put together? And if you guys look in that photo, you're going to see all sorts of horns and different instruments that are playing. So obviously capturing all of that sound and being able to use that. What are some of the skills that you had to learn to build up to doing a session, which is pretty intricate here?
Well, thankfully, like I said, I got to just watch some of the most talented engineers in the world and learn from them. The biggest thing, I don't know if y'all have ever heard, in the live world, they'll say the live sound engineer is a part of the band. Well, the tracking engineer is too, and the biggest difference in this world, as you can see, they're all reading staff music. So even if you can't read note for note, you still need to be able to count and follow along, because they might get to a point and they'll say, hey man, we need to punch bar 32 through 35. And if you just press record, by default Pro Tools starts at 0, so it might not match up. So you have to learn how to tempo map and all that to match the punch. Whereas with like a rock band or session musicians, we have what's called like a Nashville number system. So instead of like a chord chart like A, B, or A, D, E, it's actually numbers 1, 4, 5 within the key. And the reason they do that is Nashville's kind of known, particularly back in the day, to be like, here's a solo artist. They might get a song to put on the record. They've never heard it, or they've heard it once or twice. They're laying it down with the session musicians. Hey, this key, can we go up a half a step? Can we go up a whole step? It's too low. You don't have to rewrite the whole chart. It's immediately transposed for you. But in that situation as well, you have to follow along, because they'll have these numbers, and they might, we'll get done with a take, and they'll say, hey, can I get the fourth and fifth bar of the bridge? And then while the tape's running, in both situations, I'm making markers or writing numbers in Pro Tools to know exactly where they are. So based on where they tell me they want to punch in, I go 2, 3, 4 bars before that point, tell them quickly, press space bar, record, stop, end the discussion, and it's there, and we're on to the next thing.
And I'm hearing a lot of organization in what you're saying too, because I'm noticing that you guys are learning Pro Tools and different software, but what you're also learning within that is how to manage it and be efficient with it. So it's cool to know like quick keys and all that, but it's also great when you can take something like this number system and having that be explained to you. You're kind of like having some foresight, saying they're probably, every couple bars, this fits with this 4/4 style music. So I'll be able to go back to whatever section they ask me to, and it'll be quite easy instead of trying to count and sit there and count measures. In Pro Tools, it's a lot easier to mark it, as you mentioned. So
you have to be extremely efficient. I mean, people don't want to wait on you, because you've got, session musicians, they make a lot of money, and it's based on 3-hour sessions. So there's different rates. There's a demo rate, because they're all in a union. There's a demo rate. There's what's called limited pressing rate, which you're supposed to not be able to sell or press more than 10,000 copies. And that obviously pays more than the demo rate. And then there's master scale rate. So these musicians could be making anywhere from $150 to like $400 or $500 every 3 hours, and you multiply that by 6. that gets kind of expensive pretty quick. So every second counts. You've got to be on the game if you want to get hired. I mean, if you're sitting there waiting for you, you're just not going to get the gig, you know. So
that's another great skill set to keep in mind then. So efficiency and proficiency in what you're doing, and then also being willing to learn. As you had mentioned, you got to shadow, and when you were assisting, you got to learn some of I guess the ins and the do's and don'ts of that particular studio, and kind of the how they ran things. So that's something I think that's a good point, is always being willing to keep educating yourself beyond just school, being willing to learn with some of the masters that are still in the field.
Absolutely.
And that are running sessions with day by day. So.
Yeah, I mean, you guys are so lucky to have YouTube. I mean, golly, like
YouTube,
I mean, I didn't have internet in my house until I was a junior in high school, and don't think I'm that old, but like there's just so much knowledge out there. So you can really learn anything you want, but to be able to work with those guys and like in that situation, and I tried, there's really about 2 or 3 guys up there that I kind of modeled myself after. There's a guy by the name of Dan Rudin, and he was kind of a guy that I assisted for, and we did a lot of stuff like this where he doesn't have an audio engineering degree. He's got a music degree from the University of Miami. So we would record a lot of like stuff for Broadway, 48, 50-piece orchestras. So there's like, full percussion, timpani in one room. There might be, 12, 16 brass and on this side of the room, however 20 strings, whatever, and what I got from him was just the precision aspect. I would show up, he would always have me be there earlier than everybody else, and I would show up at like, if he said 8 o'clock, I might be there at 8 o'clock, and he'd just, Zach, if you're not 5 minutes early, you're late, and that, so, but I appreciated that because he had a certain pride in what he did. And there was another guy who's complete polar opposite named Joe Baldridge, and he actually teaches up at Belmont, a Grammy-winning engineer, super talented, and he was totally like super artsy. It wouldn't be past him to like push the guitar player out of the way and start dialing knobs on the pedal board and stuff, and just totally being super artistic, and so I just really love that. And there's another guy named Ben Fowler who's for a while he was the head of the P&E wing on the Grammys, and he got me into the Grammys as a voting member. And from him, he just has this grace about him that he just walks in a room and he's so kind and sweet. And I just love that because I don't like the grumpy engineer guy. I think it's important to give back and to leave the world a better place than when you got there, So it's just awesome to see the calming feeling he had in a room. So I tried to take a little of everybody in that regard, So.
Perfect. And let's take a look here. So that's awesome too. So right there we have Deep Purple. So a band that's been around for quite some time and has in their own right made all sorts of accolades, which we could just go on about. So just to show some of the credits that are coming through.
Yeah, I assisted on the record they did there. I wasn't the main guy or anything, but still just being around those guys. That's Bob Ezrin in the center. He produced all the Alice Cooper stuff and The Wall, Pink Floyd. I think that sold a couple records.
Yeah, a couple records.
Hearing those stories about how he actually recorded actual helicopter, on another brick in the wall from it's insane. So being around those guys was really cool,
A couple others there. So could you talk about the two gentlemen to your sides there, the left and right?
So that's a little bit heavier version of me on the bottom right. And the guy to my left is a guy by the name of Dan Mitchell. If you guys are into country music, he wrote the song, "If you're going to play in Texas, you got to have a fiddle in the band." And he was the studio manager at Tracking Room. And he was the first person that, kind of opened the door up to me and believed in me. And so I always appreciate him. And the gentleman above my left shoulder is Buddy Hyatt. He's a session piano player. He was in my wedding. He's family to me, and he was the first guy to say, "I want you to be my guy," and gave me the gig to actually man the board and be the guy in charge. The guy I was assisting for at the time, we had been doing demos all day, and it got to be 7, 8 o'clock at night, and his wife's friends had some friends coming in town, and I was more than capable to at least punch. The sounds were dialed in at that point. So basically I'm just running Pro Tools and punching. And he was like, "Hey, buddy, I've got some friends coming in town. You mind if I just leave and have Zach punch?" And I felt really bad because I was assisting this guy, and this is actually the guy that gave me my first internship. I didn't do anything wrong, but it really rubbed Buddy the wrong way. And so I finished that night out, and the next time he gave me the opportunity, and yeah, I guess the rest is history. So those are really special people to me. And then Jared is out of all the interns I had there, the younger guy, he's the only one that's ever been like so on top of it to the level that I feel like I was at, and even beyond what I was at. He gets it. I mean, he sees something, and he never had to be asked to do something. It was just done. And that's such an important thing, guys. Like, you got to just be on the ball. You got to be looking forward and always be looking for something to do, and stay off your cell phones. Nothing pisses me off more than when you're on your cell phone, because that just shows you don't care, you know? So like Facebook, it'll be there when you get done, you know? So.
And we've been talking about this earlier to that point is I think that you guys aren't just building a network, you know, like which you are, but it's not just networking, but you know, you had made a great illustration earlier saying you're actually building relationships. And what I like about that is that when you say relationship, that implies that it's something you got to take care of, you know, where networking is kind of like it can be sort of a sterile word, you know, and can kind of sound like kind of awkward and weird. So I think by showing, and you had mentioned it with your intern who's in this photo here, that just simply by just being engaged by what's happening in the room, not like, you know, being on the phone and doing that whole thing is enough right there to where you're just going to notice him versus maybe some of his peers that may have also tried out and wanted to intern, and then you're going to pick one of them, you know, to keep moving forward with you, and then the rest, you know, they're going to, you know, go where they go. So I just want to mention that it's always a great idea to just keep in mind with like your tech and like your phone, you know, you're building relationships, and like when someone's in front of you, it's so important to give them your attention. And you also got to remember some of the folks that you're working in the studio, they're not used to always having like a device, you know, in front of them. So to them, it's like culture shock, you know, they're not used to somebody constantly, I guess we'll say, multitasking. They're used to like single tasking, like here's what we're doing, we're going to put all our effort into this, and we're not worried about anything else right now. So I like that you brought that up earlier.
I mean, I don't want to get kicked out of here for saying this. I hate the word networking. I think it's like, how do I network? What does this mean? I don't. And it's a skill, and it's a hard skill, and I'm sure most of y'all are pretty creative people. You're introverted. I'm kind of introverted at times. The more confident you get, the more you come out, you know, of your cocoon, so to speak, I guess. But I prefer it to be referred to as building relationships, not networking. And the way you do that is you try to actually take an interest in somebody. Don't go up and just be that plastic guy that's shaking a hand and like always trying to scheme away, how can this person help me? Actually invest your time and show interest in that person. Hey man, how's your girlfriend? How's your wife? How's your kid? You know, show that you care about them as a person, you know, and if they see that, they're automatically they're going to invest back in you. And what you get back from that is just so much more. It doesn't matter how hard you work on your own. I mean, if you take that time, you'll get just so much value out of that beyond anything you can do on your own. So I hope you guys will take that to heart and, you know, take it with you. So.
And another thing that I wanted to point out here is documentation is super important, and not just digital documentation, but also, you know, we'll call this analog, but paper and pencil. So this is some of the charts, right?
So that's what I was talking about earlier about the charts, how we don't have A, B. That's what's on the screen. You see 1, 4, you know, whatever.
1, 4, 5, 1, I see.
And see how I wrote my numbers in red pencil so it stands out. So every 2 bars, the number, like basically on Pro Tools, I would have the counter, and it's scrolling through as it goes. So at like 5 seconds, I can't see from here, but whatever is the intro is the first bar, and then at 9 seconds is bar 3. So every 2 bars, I know exactly where Pro Tools is. So they go and say, hey man, I need the 5th and 6th bar of chorus 1. You can go to bar 3. You're right there, 2 bars. You better be ready because I'm ready. Bam, and you're there, and it's done, and you move on, and
Is this something that you learned in Nashville, or did you learn this beforehand?
As far as I know, I mean, it's called the Nashville number system, as far as I know. And like I said, it kind of morphed in, the 50s and 60s out of just having to, you'd show up and then the song's too high or too low is the wrong key, and they'd have to rewrite the whole chart. So this is kind of, I forget who invented it. There's tons of literature on it if you Google it. But I love it as a musician. It made sense to me. I'd been playing a long time. But it's just such a cool way to work, and they use a lot of the same. You see a repeat sign there. I don't see any there. Well, there's a fermata. We call that a diamond. The last bar, that 1 at the far right. We use a lot of the same musical notation, but it's just such an easy way to work, and I think everybody would be smart to adopt it kind of all over the world. But I mean, the LA guys, you see it. Like, I know there's a story of that piano player Buddy worked with a certain guy, and he had his chart or whatever, and the guy looked at him from a famous band. He's like, wrong town, dude. So anyway,
how important is this for you to work with your artist? So you come in, you're going to track them. Do you feel like this kind of helps you keep track of the session, not just on a technical standpoint, but kind of like where you are in the song and the needs of your clients?
I think it more than anything, it's about the musicians, because they're that. I mean, the music. Contrary to popular, in a typical Nashville session where there's a band of session players, usually there's 5 or 6 guys. There's a tracking engineer. Sometimes there's a producer, and sometimes there's an artist, or there could be multiple artists coming in throughout the day. But the main dialogue is happening between the band and the engineer, not the producer. Usually, those guys are so good that you don't have to. You can kind of give them a general idea of what to play, but they'll usually play it. And then if it's a little wrong vibe, it's like, hey man, totally different vibe, do this, and then they'll play something completely different and nail it, So what that helps is, it just helps keep you on the same page with the musicians and keeps the session flowing. Because, in most cases, we're doing 5-6 songs in 3 hours, so we're at 30-40 minutes a song. So really, you got to get a good sound, but you got to get it quick. There's not much technicality to that, because in my Pro Tool, I'll have a tracking template. I'll make tracks for all my stacks. Like, say, electric guitar is going to be something that usually is going to have multiple takes, multiple passes. So I'll have 3 electric tracks already made, already with the same input, and they're set up to go to the different more me boxes on the, that's more me box, the cue boxes or whatever, and they're already made. They're there. So that just helps communicate with the players. That's the biggest thing, and they're gonna love you for making their life easier. If you're a player and you're a musician and you need, say, 2 bars on a song, how frustrating would it be to wait for 30 seconds for the engineer to figure out how to get to that place, So I know that me being a musician has honestly helped me as much, if not more than anything, just being able to speak their language. And
I've seen also, to your point, other engineers and producers who are not actual musicians, but they've been able to speak the language, as you mentioned, as part of their skill set. And because of that, they've gotten a huge rapport with an artist, and an artist will hire them back because they're like, you just get it. You understand kind of what my needs are without me having to go in a full explanation, even if they're not a musician. Just the fact that they could have some form of a language to speak besides just saying Pro Tools, is something that they like, and something that they usually latch onto because they know that they feel comfortable and that they can count on you. It's a confidence booster when someone can understand what you're trying to tell them, in their own terms.
Yeah, it's really important to be relatable, because most artists and musicians, they're not going to know what kind of capacitors are in 11. Who cares? That's not relatable. What's relatable is a song. We all love music, we all love, songs and melodies and cool sound and stuff. So being able to speak their language is absolutely vital. So making it fun and just efficient and quick, and sitting there waiting for punches and having technical problems, which you're gonna have, but try to, like, I've been in situations where a mic might go down or a pre might go down or something will start spitting up. And I've seen guys where they're like sitting there during the middle of the session with 6 musicians. They're trying to fix whatever. Who cares? Like, go to the next channel. Like, you've got a console that big. Surely one of them works, right? So, like, go to the next channel and just get it working quickly, and they'll love you for it, So, and I've made people think I'm a genius by simply restarting the computer. Like, honestly, they're like,
Hey,
"Oh God, the computer, Pro Tools is freaking out." Restart it, and like 95% of the time it fixes it.
As basic as that sounds,
I'm serious, yeah.
Some people are not as great with a computer, and it could be as simple as just, hey, let's hit restart, where they may be great in other areas, but when it comes to, like, let's just say on the computer, they just get lost. And that's just, again, if you're able to just have the foresight to say, let's just try this and see if it'll, fix the problem.
Yeah.
You're solving problems.
Yeah, try not to overanalyze it. I mean, if you've been on Pro Tools for a while and it starts doing something you've never seen, usually it's just a bug. Get out of it. It's a plug-in or something. Just shut it down, restart it. You'll save yourself a lot of time and hassle.
I'm just going through here. So, awesome photo here that you got going on. So if you want to talk about what's going on, we'll start on the right there. What were you guys working?
I can't remember, but that particular producer is a guy by the name of Ron Cornelius. He's played guitar with Bob Dylan and Leonard Cohen back in the day. So that's from 5-6 years ago. So just a guy that hired me to work on an album, and then those are Neve 1081s. That's my personal favorite pre and EQ. Like, I love them. They sound amazing on everything you put them on, and they're great. So I could talk all day and geek out, but they're great.
We'll go through some more stuff. Oh, cool. So we also have some Ocean Wave in here. So you've, a part of your work, you were at Tracking Room for 6 years. You became, head engineer, studio manager. You've got credits everywhere from Taylor Swift to Buddy Guy, Joe Walsh, and who else do we have? Deep Purple. And so what are some of the traits that you're taking with you between sessions? Because that's I would imagine pretty interesting to go from, like blues type session and then working with something that maybe is like pop, like Taylor, or maybe something to rock with Deep Purple. So how do you adjust with your clients?
I think the most important thing is to be willing to adjust. I was telling the guys earlier, despite what anybody may tell you, if you're an engineer, whether you're mixing, tracking, whatever, you're in a customer service business. At the end of the day, your job at a very elementary level is like the waitress at the ale house, man. You got to serve that client. You got to serve what they want. And while it's great, and there's some clients that are not technical at all, they're gonna need you to kind of pull through and get more creative and pull more ideas. But there's others that are super in control. They want to control every aspect of it. And in that case, you just kind of have to say, okay, man, cool. Just be there to serve them however they need and be flexible. So to answer your question is just being willing to kind of roll with the punches and analyze. I'm always analyzing who I'm working for, who is paying my invoice today, and what is their goal. Like, if their goal is to track 25 demos in a day, we need to go, and I'm going to fly through. If we're doing more of like a record and we're doing maybe a song an hour, which still sounds super fast, but with these musicians, trust me, they're unbelievable. You can get a really good production in that time, or at least something to take home and overdub on. Then you want to spend a little more time and say, hey man, does the let me change this, and it's just about analyzing the situation, stepping outside yourself, and not trying to serve yourself and your own ego. Serve them. That is absolutely just vital. Otherwise, you just come across kind of like a guy that's in it for themselves, So.
And could you talk more about currency? I'm not just talking money, because we all know we have to pay our bills.
Mm-hmm.
We know that we have a living expense that we have to at least live at to take care of business. But you had mentioned before that there was also other currency in our industry, since we are service-based. We are serving a client, and we want to serve them well and make sure that they're comfortable, they have what they need. So aside from making a paycheck, which we all need to live, what are some of the other currencies that you found through the years that have served you well aside from the paycheck?
Well, like I said earlier, the building relationships. I mean, I can't hone in on that enough. That's, you do a favor for somebody, and it could be something. I have a girl that's been vital in my career. She actually introduced me to Keb, and through Keb, I got to work with Taj, and I got to work with Joe, and it's just blossomed. And she just the other day, like this weekend, she's like, "Hey, can you convert these waves into MP3s?" I mean, that's something for me. It's like, okay, that's so primary, but to her, it's a big deal. And while I might. It's like, man, I got to spend 30 minutes doing this when I've got this to do. It's easy to think that way, but by doing that one favor, she's willing to do me so much more. So building up a currency in that. And the other thing's time. I mean, you have to analyze every situation and say, okay, this is going to take me X amount of time. Is it worth my time? Or, and say you're in a situation where you might, if you're dabbling in songwriting or whatever, you might have a right, and that might not pay you, tomorrow, but then you get called last minute to do a session. You have to weigh it, and that's something only you can decide. Do I want to make this quick money that I'll get paid right away, or do I want to build this relationship that could lead to this relationship and this relationship? And that's something only you can decide in that situation. Every situation is different, but they all have value. Don't always just look at the bottom line as I got to make this amount of money every month. That's such a big mistake I've made, for 8 years. Is it was all about the cash. And yeah, like you said, while it is, you can just get so much further by, building relationships and having people and having value in people and them you.
Absolutely. So we'll take a look at some other shots we have here.
And it's Ocean Way, by the way. So I don't want them in Nashville to see me and think, whoa. But it is Ocean Way Studios. It's okay. But so that's a shot from the A room there. That's this giant, like 80-something channel Neve board that's just unbelievable. And I was EQing super fast, so fast that my hands blurred.
You look at your hand, you can't even. I mean, that's like ninja speed mixing going on there. So we'll get into Taj Mahal, which is an awesome album if you got to listen to that collaboration, and I know that like a lot of your, like, we'll say currency has come with building relationships. And I know Taj, you built a relationship, and Keb, you built a relationship, and Buddy Guy, you've built a relationship. So we'll go through the next section here of these photos, and besides the gear. I know that you have some interesting stories, especially about the breakfast we'll probably see here in a couple slides. So again, with your sheet music there, which you had mentioned, and the documentation.
That's Keb's home studio, all those last photos, and that was us doing horns on the record. So just 3 players, three ribbon mic in front of all of them, and then a couple of room mics. Nothing, not reinventing the wheel. Just I've always liked ribbons on horns because I always try to counteract. If something's super bright, I'll try to put a dark mic on it, and vice versa. Because you don't want to put like the brightest mic on something super bright, because then you're just gonna just be uber bright, and it's gonna sound too bright. So.
Move on through here. So there's the breakfast. So I love when you talk about this story, if you could. So what's the significance of why that plate's there?
Yeah, Keb's just such a an amazing human being, and I've gotten so much as much musical wisdom as I got for him. The things that I've gotten from him about life are just so vital. But to speak to the kind of person he is, like one of our first sessions, I show up to track and it's 9, 10 o'clock. Hey man, you want some breakfast or whatever, So he literally went upstairs and this, Grammy, 3-time Grammy winner, like made me eggs. I just thought that was so cool. It's like he's just, like a normal person and everything. So
I think that goes back to what you said. Serving not just your client but building a relationship. So he's like, hey, this guy's going to work with me for the next, number of hours. I want to make sure he's happy. And he's got some breakfast.
And that's what he wants.
3-time Grammy winner making him breakfast. You see, no one's above, and that's, I think, speaks a lot about, the integrity.
And he knows by bringing himself down to my level that it's going to make me serve him however I need to. I'm going to have that automatic respect for him that, it's just kind of it's a human thing, I guess, so anyway, he's a really special guy and I just love him to death. They're on a cruise right now, finishing up the tour, and we'll be getting to work on some stuff when he gets back. So
cool, we'll cycle through. So next to you there, who we got in the photo?
Yeah, that was kind of an what am I doing here moment. That's Joe Walsh in that picture, and he came and played on 3 tracks on the Taj Mahal record, and wow, just what do you even say? I mean, it just doesn't get much bigger than Hotel California, or as a guitar player. I mean, well, wow, what a cool guy, man. I remember he broke a string, it was playing one of Keb's Gretches, and he had me like hold it in place. It had one of those bridges like that, and he's like, fixing it, and he's like, I used to do this myself, but then I got rich. So he was great. But yeah, I mean, what do you say? It's just kind of that whole. And you don't be fooled. Like every day is not like that. I mean, those are days that happen, really. I mean, that happened one day in a 10-year career. But that's what makes it great, is that, you have the peak. If it was like that every day, it wouldn't be as cool, So just enjoy the ride, man. Don't try to get to the top right away. Enjoy the ride, enjoy the journey, because like that's another thing I failed at when I got there. I put so much pressure on myself to get to the top right away that I didn't always enjoy, just the moment. And so it's all part of the process, I guess.
Of course it is. So we'll take it's just a quick little clip here. See if the audio's up. And this is and this was shot, and you can see that he's actually playing a conch as an instrument. So just to show you guys, when it comes to skill set, like we were talking about, and versatility, he has a giant seashell, and he's like, I'm going to use this as my instrument today. So if you have never heard one, I mean, they're very interesting sounding, and that does require you to experiment if you've never had to mic one and figure out, the sound and what it is. So let's take a listen to that real quick.
Yeah, I still don't know how you're able to change pitch. Like, I don't know, but that was same session doing horns, and there's a super world kind of feel track on that record called Soul, and they just threw everything in the kitchen sink at it, and he's like, hey man, I'm gonna play this conch shell, and I was like, oh.
Had that been the first time that you had mic'd one of those?
Yeah, and the last time, yeah. So, but I mean, hey, man, it's hard to tell because you can't really hear it in the context. But I mean, that guy, he made it work, And I actually ended up sitting right beside him. They finished their show at the Ryman, or their tour at the Ryman, and ended up sitting right next to him. So no.
That's unbelievable. Yeah. I'm sure that was pretty cool too to be able to do.
Yeah,
like that's an unusual instance, but what a cool instrument.
Yeah, and
to
I brought
have
it
the
up,
opportunity to
Oh yeah, you're the conch shell guy. No, he's obviously a really talented trombone player too. But just to be able to do that is really cool.
And another shot that we have here, what I liked about this was just the patching you have going on, just to further shows the skills between knowing like your analog, your digital, and then also being able to keep up with routing. Where are we sending a signal? Where are we bringing a signal back? And being able to keep track of what you're doing, between channels, and when you start going and processing to maybe outboard gear and back again. So
yeah, that's a studio I work at called Catch This Music a lot. I do a lot of my demo sessions there now. And that's a Trident 80B. They're not as, revered as like the Neves or APIs, but that's a really, really great sounding console. Love it on drums and that's just the analog board. And
didn't you mention that you did something like 38? What was it? 38 songs.
38 demos in one day, as far as I know, is the record.
38 demos.
And I was song hungover for about 3 days. But we fortunately on the 6 p.m., which is sessions start at 6 to 9, we hired a second electric player, so nobody had to stack, and we were able to just kind of go. But yeah, I mean it takes a physical, mental, and I was hurting that day, but we've gotten over 30 one other time, but we'll do 20 or 25 about every month, with this particular crew. And I'm a part of many, several circles, but that's just one particular crew. That's
sure.
His business model. He'll send out blasts he's been doing clients, and this is Buddy, that same guy from that slide earlier. He'll send out a blast to all his clients. He's been doing this since 1982, and he'll have people send him tracks where they won't even be there, and we'll record them. He might do some like EPs where he'll do 5 songs on one artist, and sometimes you'll have a different person and a different client every song. So it's tough because you got to turn around, you got to smile, hey, Jeb, or whatever, like, how you doing? And meet as many people as you can and try to be gracious, but still constantly, you obviously have to be fast, getting your punches, making the next song, finding a tempo, because like they'll play a work tape, I'm tapping tempo, find it, it's just it's a busy thing. So
nice. So we're just going through some more of the photos. So Fairchild, which is an awesome piece of equipment, and some more console shots here.
That's Ocean Wave B. So that's the other studio. That's a neat VR console. It's great room. That's a shot from Sound Emporium, which is another famous studio up there. A lot of hit records made. Really cool room. Yeah.
Moving on.
That is, so the guitar on the left, there's the most famous guitar player in Nashville. His name's Brent Mason. He's a legend up there. If you've ever heard a George Strait song or Alan Jackson, he played on pretty much every major thing in the 90s and into the 2000s, still does. But that's his guitar. He has a custom setup where, that's a Gibson Mini humbucker in the neck. He has a Seymour Duncan in the middle, and then the standard kind of telly. And he has it to where he can blend different pickups rather than just switch, and blend. He'll actually blend a certain amount of the middle one. But I mean, that's just such an iconic guitar. It will end up in the Hall of Fame. And then the picture deck, my buddy Mitch, he's on The Voice right now, and that's just him overdubbing in my home studio. And I thought it was cool because he's like he's on Team Blake or whatever. I don't watch The Voice, but it's just kind of cool that he's having success. He's a buddy of mine from down the road in Charleston. So,
and what I'm liking and what I want to relate back to the skill set portion of what we were talking about is being able to move from board to board and being able to be comfortable. Because I mean, if you look in some of those shots, you have this huge 64 channel console, and then maybe we drop down to something that's like maybe only 24, and still making that work for the session and the clients that you have. So I'm just seeing a lot of versatility in what you've been able to provide your clients, even if like the console itself has changed and you don't have like a huge Ocean Way 64 channel console in front of you, even in your house. Look at that, you got a nice setup, and you're just
I think I was telling you guys earlier, I cut I cut a record on a Texas country artist named Stoney LaRue last Monday and Tuesday, and it's this prolific songwriter Gary Nicholson, who I work with some. He's written with like Ringo Starr. He's big time, dude. Don't misinterpret. I have not worked with Ringo Starr. He has. So he produced, and he just got a thing in his little studio in his basement. He's got a million cool guitars, but he has an Apollo 16, and I've got to record a 5-piece band, and two of my inputs I have to use for the room talk back, and then one for my talk back, because you have to. I'll sacrifice extra mics on the drums to be able to communicate, especially when they're in a basement. I don't feel like running down there every take and coming back, So I had 14 inputs, and it's like, and he's got some cool Vintech stuff, which is like the knee knockoffs, and he's got some decent pre's, but it's certainly nothing like what I've shown. But it's like, all right, cool, I'm going to make it work, and I'm going to make it sound awesome, and it's going to be fun, and we're going to cut a great record. And because that goes back to being versatile and stepping outside and serving that particular situation, and it was an unbelievable record, one I'm going to be really proud of when it comes out. So
I'm sure that helps you evolve as an engineer as well, because it's challenging you in different areas, to pull out, the sounds and being creative, with sometimes, doing more with less, and being able to still provide the same quality service.
That's the key. I mean, it's kind of the same principle as like I'm sure y'all have heard, the simplest things are the coolest. It's kind of the same principle. I mean, sometimes, I've never been one to need to have 20 mics on the drums. I mean, personally, I try to make it work with, what it calls for. It's analyzing the situation and trying to serve that situation, that song, that record, and going from there. There's another pile of tracks at the end of one of those long slam sessions.
So documentation, again, just super important. Analog, digital, paper, however you want to look at it. So just make sure you guys are aware of that, because sometimes people forget that it's like, no, there's going to be documentation, especially if you're doing like an actual record, not just like maybe one song you're tracking, but you're doing the whole thing.
We always have physical paper, I've never worked a session where there's not a chart of some kind, unless it's a band. But even a lot of times, like, we'll do a band, but the drummer might not be quite able to hang with the click, so they'll bring in a session drummer, or they'll have like 2 session guys with a band. But while the band guys might not have a chart, the session guys will always have a chart. There's always charts, always, every time.
Charts galore, right?
Yeah, man.
And so we got
that's actually Brent, the guitar player that I was talking about on the far right. Some other guys, Lonnie Wilson, Mike Johnson. That's Buddy again, the guy in the picture with his back turned, and just another random session.
Cool. And string session you got going on.
Yeah.
So again, just showing the versatility and your flexibility that you mentioned before with going the extra mile, saying, yeah, I might like this one genre of music and love to work in that field, but when opportunity comes, you still have to be versatile and work, with different artists, which I think helps challenge you as an engineer. I think it's going to help, in my opinion. I think it helps you, kind of by stepping outside your comfort zone, it helps challenge you in ways that you end up using that information later on, maybe not right away, but you end up using it later because you had that experience and you got to learn. So
yeah, you don't ever want, for me, I love the aspect of different and trying something new every day, and anytime I get to do something a little outside the box, it's always fun. It's like, oh, I hadn't done this. Every now and again, I'll even get called to do a live gig, which I've never been a live sound guy, but every time I've done it, fortunately, it's gone really well, and I hadn't made anybody deaf with loud feedback. But yeah, it's like, okay, I'll do this. I don't want to go on the road and be away from my wife and my kid, but I'll do it every once in a while for a local gig, and I'm humbled again that the guy, maybe their normal guy can't do it, but I'm the first guy they think of. That's just humbling to me and really cool, So
Cool. So we'll go through some other shots. We have some other
That's that
musicians
smaller.
and-
The Trident board. That's like the live room of it. Again, it's a smaller space, but that's kind of like a typical, Nashville. You've got everybody together, kind of recording at once. Drums, the steel player, the guitars on the other side. You can't electric guitar. Can't see him, and then the bass. And then there's probably a keys player in one of the booths, and the acoustic player in one of the booths, and then obviously the singer will get a scratch vocal in one of the booths.
So we got some other shots here.
More action, yeah. That's Dan again, same guy that gave me my intern. That's cool because he gave me the internship at Tracking Room, and this is last year, so this is fast forward 9 years, and he's still in demoing songs and writing songs, producing songs, and
That's awesome. You still stay in touch with someone who gave you your first chance. That again, building a relationship and then keeping it. That's
man.
pretty cool
It was funny how I'm walking through these classrooms earlier, and I was like, I remember right here, I did this, and you were like, how do you remember that? And I remember more about when I started than the whole process, because it's kind of a blur, the 10 years. But I definitely, I come from the school. Don't ever forget where you come from. That's something my mom and specifically my mom, but. My dad ingrained in me early, and I think it speaks to such a larger thing. And just stay humble, don't ever get an ego, and so that's from Ricky Skaggs has a studio up in Hendersonville, which is 15 minutes north of town. That's from a session earlier this year on the AMAC, which y'all didn't have that anymore, right? Y'all got rid of it?
No, we updated, but
Gotcha.
yeah, we had for years in 1998i,
Mm-hmm.
which I believe is that console right there.
Yeah.
And so now we fast forward in your career, and I understand that in about the last 3 years you've branched out.
Mm-hmm.
You've kind of became, I guess we'll call it freelance with your producing and mixing.
That's what it is. Yeah.
Yeah, and so you walked away from the Tracking Room. So if you could talk on on that, how do you go from because everyone wants to get the opportunity, you get it, and then you're living it. And then now, in a sense, it might feel like you're walking away from a great opportunity, but it looks to me like because you've kept your relationships, you've kept your skill set, you've done some favors, as you mentioned, for some people throughout the years, that it seems like it's been a good thing for you that you've gone out, you've now are freelancing, and that you seem to be very happy doing it.
Well, I think it's kind of when you're a staff guy at a place, I got called for a few sessions at other places, particularly toward the end when I had been doing it so long that it was like, okay, I trust this guy. But when you're a staff guy at a place, you're kind of going to be the guy at that place. When you're free agent, so to speak, the opportunities all of a sudden just all these doors open up. So, well, fortunately they did for me. As far as leaving and all that, you get to a place after 6 years at a place, you've been doing the same thing, and making sure the trash is emptied, chasing this random company down for a year to pay an invoice for one day, those kind of things. It's it gets kind of exhausting after a while. And after all, you are a creative person. You love music. And I believed in my talent and always have and still do. And so it is tough because you don't know, have I made enough of an impression on my clients that they'll come with me, they'll still hire me, or do they think, well, he's just kind of a product of the studio, or he's a product of, if you are sports guys, you've heard, well, this quarterback is just a product of the, whatever. So you don't know. At the time, a guy came in towards the end of it that just it was not a good fit, and I had been ready to jump for a while. So it just got to be time, and you make a leap of faith, you go for it, and it's all worked out. So 10 days later, I had a new opportunity at CTM to start working there some, and had built relationships with all the other studios, and I still work at Tracking Room some. So it's all good, It's been been the best thing that ever happened to me, fortunately, so.
Awesome. Well, at this time, we can open up the floor for questions. So if you guys have questions, you can raise your hand, and we'll get a microphone to you. And if there's any questions online, you can certainly let me know. While we're waiting for that, we have a question right there in the back.
Yeah, what you got?
We're waiting for a mic to get to her. So but she's got a mic there, so here it comes. In the meantime, while they're doing that, it's a good picture of Buddy Guy in the studio there playing, so that's cool.
Awesome.
There we go.
Hey.
Hi, Zach.
Hi, how you
I'm
doing?
actually a teacher here.
Oh, wonderful.
And I have my students, my classes here.
Oh, wonderful.
And this month I have a lot of music production students, and a lot of them want to get into composing and songwriting.
Very cool.
And at the beginning, Nat had mentioned that you did some songwriting. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Sure. Any aspect of it you want to hear about in particular? Okay. Well, I think songwriting is just the key to it. Is just Nashville is a songwriting town, and man, I thought I wrote good songs until I got up there, and I still don't write as good a song. These people are just so good. But you go up there and you can go to these, they call them writers' nights, and there will be 3 or 4 writers sitting around in a circle with an acoustic guitar and piano, and they'll go and they'll just tell the story of the song, and the way they're able to get inside lyrically, and I was talking to some folks earlier, and it's, for me, when I'm writing, a lot of times I'll write backwards. And what I mean by that is I might have the hook first. If you have that hook, and thing that you can center your whole thing around, it's like having the franchise quarterback. You can build the whole song around this. So say you have a catchy line, and generally in pop, a lot of times the hook it'll resolve that last line of the chorus. So since I'm starting at the end of the chorus, and I know that word that it's going to end on, then it's like, okay, I'm going to develop my rhyme scheme from here. I might write, or the first and third line's going to rhyme, the second and fourth line's going to rhyme, or all 4 lines of the chorus going to rhyme. It's just and then analyzing what that hook is, and trying to point as much to that as you can, if that makes sense. Always, don't just say, just some random thought. Try to have every word, everything have a meaning, and try to say as much as you can with as little as possible. Is that kind of okay?
Awesome. Okay, looks like we have a question over here.
Yeah.
So you just put your hand up, we'll get the mic to you.
Yeah.
And while that's happening, just another shot of some equipment you used on the Buddy Guy session behind me there.
Sure.
U47 API console there. And a good shot of you and the man himself.
Yeah, me about 30 pounds heavier.
Not at all. Okay, so where did our question go? Oh, we're running the mic. Okay. Here we go. Cool.
What's up, man?
You were talking about making yourself essential through having a certain skill set. What do you think are some skills that are often overlooked that could be really useful to stay?
Well, like I said, early on, you're going to have to, depending on where you go, depending on where you end up, you're going to have to prove yourself. And so, I mean, if you're able to, I think the skills, the primary stuff, the dishwasher, the dishes, the trash, the coffee, all those kind of things that are so basic, but it's I've just seen so many interns come in and they're on their phones, or they're talking about, whatever, just having a conversation. And it's cool that they're trying to have a conversation. I get that, and that's great, but it's to me, it was always more about handle your business first and then play after, so if you can go in and it's just kind of rewinding to when I was a staff engineer, and I would go to I'll mention Dan Rudin again. He told a funny story one time where he was engineering a session, and like he was out of coffee, and like he does a couple punches, and he literally like turns and his coffee cup's filled, and he didn't even realize that the guy had come and got it and went and done it. And it's like, man, that seems like you kind of, maybe it feels demeaning at first, but man, I'm telling you, you will gain so much respect because you're lowering yourself down and you're humbling yourself. And then all of a sudden they're going to be like, hey man, so what do you do? You know, what are you into? And they'll start to learn about you, and then they'll just give you all this just wisdom and knowledge that's just so valuable. And the more they invest in you, you invest in them, they'll start to try to find ways to help you. Whether they can hire you or not is one thing, but even if they can't, they might know somebody who's looking for somebody. You know what I mean? So is that going to help?
Wow, that's good advice.
This guy right
Okay,
here.
we'll take this right here, and then we'll go to our online question here right after. So.
Oh,
Cool.
There's actually people watching.
Yeah, there is.
How you doing?
What you got, my man?
Okay, quick question. What approach would you take to get an internship?
Well, again, I think it's important to. I think I said this earlier, where don't always feel like you're allowing companies to qualify you. Know your audience and qualify them. Like, I mean, what do you want? Let me ask you a question. What do you want? Like, what kind of an internship are you thinking? Do you want to work in a studio, or do you want to work for a publishing company? What do you work in a studio? Okay, so let's just say, for instance, you want to work in a studio. You want to be a staff engineer. Okay, like, let's say you're into hip hop, and so Atlanta's got a bunch of hip hop or whatever, and I would say go to studios that do hip hop, because you're going to relate to those people more because you're into that kind of music than you would like go into like a studio that does gospel music. You know what I mean? So qualify them. Learn as much as you can about a particular company, and the people that work at a particular company. Try to fill voids in that, And again, like, I was sitting right up there 10 years ago, and the guy that produced all the Kansas stuff, he said the whole "make yourself irreplaceable" line that just stuck with me, and that's the whole coffee and everything. So, while it's hard. And it can be daunting, and you hate like cold calling and everything. It's just wait for your opportunities. They'll come. I didn't get my first real internship in Nashville for, I think it was 6-7 months. But once that window just cracked a little bit, I was jumping through it, and I was not turning back. So, just know your audience, know your companies, and try to find companies that you feel like they will relate to you. That's, like I said, I went to Nashville because I felt like I'll be able to get along with these people, because it's a Southern good old boy thing, and I think that's a vital thing, man. So.
Awesome. I think we had an online
I'm
question.
gonna swing around so I don't unplug my mic. What you got?
Yes. So Gustavo would like to know, have you ever worked on Blackbird Records or studios in Nashville?
Blackbird Records. Is that a band or there's a studio called Blackbird Studios. Yes, I've worked it there, several sessions. That's where we did the Buddy Guy vocals. So we did those over the summer, and that's all this stuff's done. So yes, I've worked there a handful of times. I don't know if there's a band or something that he's referring to, but yes, I have worked at that studio. It is the creme de la creme. I mean, it's like everything you ever want. They just, it's unreal. Like it humbles me every time I go there. So shout out to those guys for sure. So
Nice. Other questions? Let me see where we're at here. We miss anybody? All right, great. Well, we're just about at time. I wanted to thank you for coming out. And before we ended, you had a cool story about Buddy Guy when you were a student here, actually in like 06 or 07. You were here at Full Sail. You moved here from South Carolina.
Mm-hmm.
And so what's that cool story that you have about Buddy Guy?
There was a music history teacher, I remember. Yeah, another name I'm going to throw at you. He's been marveling at all the names I remember. Rich Odd, I don't know if he's still here or not. Maybe he's not. But anyway, yeah, do you guys still have the music history class? That was such a cool class for me. So the first lecture at the time was a blues chapter. So we go through the Delta blues and the Chicago blues, the Texas blues, and the whole thing. Well, a couple weeks later, Buddy was headlining a show downtown Nashville, and it was a free deal. And he was like, if you can go, you should really go. It was on a weekend. So me and my buddies go down, and he does this thing every show where he's got a wireless pack on his guitar, and he's soloing, and he starts in, and second song, he goes down into the crowd, and just starts, soloing, just going right up to people and engaging with his fans and interacting with people, like so he's blazing through the solo for, a good 10 minutes, and he walks all the way to the back of the crowd. And if this is the stage, me and my friends were kind of along the barricade over here, and he walks all the way to the back where we can't even see him. We can hear what's going on, but we're against the barricade, and we start to see the crowd move, and he's kind of starting to walk back to the stage. And I'm realizing he's walking right towards me. And like, sure enough, he walks like right up to me, and just like right at the point of the solos kind of reaching his tension. And he gets right in front of my face. Just, it just blew me away that this guy who, this is like Jimi Hendrix hero, he's like a straight OG guy. If you don't know about him, you need to know about him. This is history, and whether you're into blues or not, this guy is just, he's your hero's hero, trust me. So anyway, fast forward 10 years, I get called by Tom Hambridge, who produces all his records. Just a super guy, unbelievable. Plays drums, writes all the songs for him.
I think we had a photo of him in
yeah, that's him right there. To do these, and I'd been hoping, like, Buddy's very, like, he has always stuck to his guys. He didn't want to change it up for whatever reason. Their engineer couldn't do it, so I was like, because I've been working with Tom on various things for years, and fortunately I got the call to do this. So anyway, fast forward 10 years, I get the call. We're doing 4 days of vocals with him, which is, while initially I was like, man, I wish I would have been the tracking guy, I was almost kind of happier because you'll get more one-on-one intimate time with the guy by doing the vocals. So we do this, and this is the week the Stanley Cup this year was starting, and Nashville was in the Stanley Cup, and they brought it by Blackbird to film like a pregame segment. So the owner of Blackbird comes in and is like, hey, if you guys want a picture of the Stanley Cup, it's going to be next door. And we're like, yeah, that's really cool, because it's the same trophy. They don't recycle it. It's the same one every year. It's from dating back, however, I'm not a hockey. We don't have ice. We don't have no ice down south, So anyway, it comes through, we take a break, and Tom, he's from Buffalo, so he was all about it, and Buddy's manager was all about it. And I just kind of sit there, and I was like, it's just me and him, and I'm like, screw the Stanley Cup, so I like start talking to him, and that was my opportunity to tell him that story, that 10 years ago he got to play to me, and now here I am. And he was just so, like, he thought it was the coolest thing, and it was like the Joe Walsh thing. It was just like one of those moments that, it's what you give up everything in your life to get to, it's an awesome thing. So
to wrap it up, and thanks for your time today, that just goes to show that if you guys, just stick with your craft and learn the skills and build relationships, which is so important. You never know that you could, eventually just go work with one of your heroes, and it's possible. That's the cool thing about our industry. That's a reality that you can do. Well, thank you so much, Zach, for being here with us and spending time. Thank you guys for being here. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time.